Should that be on?
That one is on. Is the light on when it's on?
Well, it's closed.
The one's closed.
Hello, welcome to Loyalty Cup Reviews. Today we will be reviewing the movie Killing of a Sacred Deer from director Yorgos Lanthimos. Andy, take it away.
We've got a quick synopsis here. According to Internet Movie Database, they claim Stephen, a charismatic surgeon, is forced to make an unthinkable sacrifice after his life starts to fall apart, when the behavior of a teenage boy he has taken under his wing turns sinister. I think that synopsis alone is problematic, but we can tear that apart as we move forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe the main character as charismatic. Definitely eccentric, not charismatic. Without getting into spoilers, Andy, what are your general thoughts on this movie?
I think I may, unfortunately, be in the minority that likes it. I think cinematically it's a beautiful film. It's really well done and polished on the surface. And I think as you go through the movie, it proves to be challenging in terms of suspense or horror-related movie. I'm not sure what they claim it is, if it's, drama or what, but it's definitely in that kind of horror, psychological thriller realm.
There's this pastiche to it, actually. There's a style that's really being pulled off that's interesting to me that isn't like other Yorgos Lanthimos movies. It does have this horror movie aesthetic that starts really early on. This movie, I think, does some world building, and it's not like we're on Mars or in some fantastical land, but there is world building, and the characters do act a certain way. I can't get into it without going into spoilers, but I think it does that successfully, even though it doesn't feel that way at first. But as a whole, I think the movie fails because it's just it's not a good movie. it's just the movie. The movie for me came to a screeching halt and ended with a thud that was super unsatisfying. So I just wasn't wild about it.
I thought it stunk. It does look nice, and I guess as a whole, it's a decent enough movie. It's just kind of stupid. It's all just very weird for the sake of being weird. There's supposedly a lot of symbolism that I don't think matters what it means. It stunk. It was way too long. It feels like it was written by a computer. And that's really all I can say about it. I don't like the movie. I don't think it was good.
Okay, I want to hear more about that, but first we're going to go into spoilers. Andy, I want to hear more about your argument as to why this movie works.
Well, I think for those people who don't like it, I would argue if you throw in a little, suspension of disbelief about the whole logic of the movie, and what I mean by that is he talks like a robot. He has a very precise way of talking, and that kind of carries over to his immediate family too. And there's very few outside characters to let you in if it's the world itself or their family. And whether or not his precise way of talking is just because he's a surgeon and he has this mathematical way about him. And I think it takes a while in the movie to kind of become accustomed to that. But I think if you can accept that for what it is, that'll help just the enjoyment of the movie or your viewing of the movie.
So basically put aside the things I hate about it, it's a good movie.
So the fact that they're so precise and they're so matter of fact, I think once it gets to that big spoiler in the movie where Martin basically says, oh, well, I'm going to spell it out for you. You killed my father, and now someone in your family has to die, and it's going to happen, and these things are going to happen. I think the matter-of-factness in the movie prior to that allows that to be, without that matter-of-factness, that would be questioned in any other movie or film.
So I think I 100% agree with you in that you have to buy into, and it's not necessarily buy into, right? It's you can accept that they talk and communicate in that way, sure, but I think that you have to almost let that sort of world that exists, because it's not just the main character, it's not just the family. Everyone seems to talk in this way that is matter of fact. It's it's in this universe where people are monotone, and speaking is simply an efficient transmission of information, right? And because you build this world where it's like that, when the sinister things that start happening, it feels that much more creepy, right? Because all they can say is exactly what's
Yeah,
happening.
and they allow it to happen because of that.
Yeah, it's super terrifying.
And I think that's evidence early in the movie in the watch scene, which is like, I think one of the first major scenes where you see the main character, Stephen, talking to his anesthesiologist. They're just discussing watches and like the depth of water resistance and the type of watch and all these things. And to me, that was such a bizarre conversation. I was like, I immediately thought it was weird, and then it continued for the whole movie like that. And I think, so right away, they kind of take ownership over that and let the viewer know this isn't normal, but you have to accept it.
It wasn't even so much that it wasn't normal, it was just so mundane.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, they had just got done cutting open a human being, and they want to talk about watch band preferences. And it's something I feel that's kind of overdone in movies now. It's just making things so starkly contrasted, like it's something to do. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we just got done cutting these people, look how unaffected I am by it. Now I'm discussing watches.
In a moment, like for about 30 minutes before it comes to that moment where it just randomly tells you the plot of the rest of the movie. So like there's the world building, there's like the characters, there's getting to know them and understand them and how they interact. And then for half an hour they just don't have anything to do, and so they just continue being awkward together, which is not fun to watch, and especially because you're already struggling trying to grasp exactly what the movie's even about, and then the character tells you what it's about, which is like an interesting moment, sure, and it is like a point of contrast, but you know, as an experiment of, you know, just completely keeping people in the dark and then pulling off that curtain, I think it fails. It didn't entertain me enough up until that moment.
So I would argue, I don't think they were unaware of that, though. I think that was intentional. And I think one thing that supports that is the way that the film is made. And what I mean by that is, for a lot of the scenes, it's either like basic tracking shots following the characters or just a steady shot of like a hospital room. And then all of a sudden there's a scene where Stephen forces his kid to try to walk and pulls him on the wheelchair, and they're running in the hallway, and the camera looks handheld and jittery, and it looks like there's all of a sudden an element of aggression or fear, and that's like represented by Stephen. And then I think it starts to spin out of control. I think similarly it starts to spin out of control when he does address what's happening and sits down with Stephen, and Martin says, this is what's going to happen. So I think that was intentional. And yeah, it's boring and it may not make for the best filmmaking, but that build-up, when something does happen, it makes it all the more important because of that.
I think you're
in
right,
my view.
And that's why I was on board. I thought it was, like, the first half hour was just, like I said, written by a computer. It seemed like an AI experiment in can a computer make a movie, write and direct a movie. It was so robotic, so everyone was so unaffected, and yeah, and then you get to that point where it could have spun into something. You know, it could have turned real wild and gone crazy, like a what the fuck is it? like a Rosemary's Baby type thing, where it's so mundane and everything is kind of weird. There's a creepiness to it, which Rosemary's Baby is an actual horror movie. This I don't believe for a second. It has very much to do with a horror film at all. And people want to say that it's these things, and I disagree. And you can sit there and you can get real entangled in the movie and try and find what you want in it. But for me, that's not fun. Like, if you're gonna have to go through all the weird symbolism, it's like that's not what I want. So if you're gonna be that mundane and weird, and then not have it really come to a real climax, for me that didn't happen. So he could have gone nuts. You know, the whole movie could have gone wild at the end, and I would have loved it.
Do you think it didn't go wild at the end?
Not at all.
Let's get to that, actually, right? So at a certain point, the kid, Martin, who's just been acting really bizarre throughout the movie, tells him essentially that, listen, one of your family's members are going to die one by one unless you do something about it. And the only thing you can do is sacrifice one of them. What happens is that their legs just get paralyzed, right? And that's the first step. Second step is, what is it?
Lack of hunger.
The eyes bleed.
Lack of hunger. And then the final step, in which you only have hours to live at that point, is that you start bleeding from your eyes. And all this stuff is, and this is why I think it's a horror movie. I wanted it to be a psychological thriller. Like, I wanted it to be a psychological horror in the way The Witch is, or like The Babadook, where it's this internal struggle between the characters at a certain point. And this is where it was already kind of bumming me out. This is where it really disappointed me. The horror stuff was good, like seeing them writhe around the ground, the way the eyes bleed. I agree with you in the beginning of the film, the way those tracking shots happen. There's this excellent part where the tracking shot is coming into the living room, and as it's getting closer to the living room, the volume of their voices gets louder. So it really feels like somebody is creeping into this other being is creeping into their lives. And it very well could represent that, right? This idea of the curse coming in on their home. But this psychological horror thing never really pays off. The interactions that they have, they know they're going to be sacrificed. So they start competing for their father's favor, right? And I think I'm thinking this is going to pay off so great. In the final scene, it's going to be this thing where each of them are like vying for his attention and trying to explain their best attributes, or they're fighting, or it's literally going to be like a brawl of some sort. And then the scene happens with the bag over the head, and it's just frustrating for me. I couldn't believe that's how the movie was going to end.
Well, and I think to what you just said about them either brawling or competing, that does happen a little bit, but they don't push it. You know, they compete in the fact that the son basically says, you know, I think, Dad, you're right. I do want to be a heart surgeon or whatever it was. And the daughter even says to the brother, she goes, when you die, can I have your iPod? I lost my other two. You know, she's implying like he's going to die first.
Yeah.
And so I think those assumptions or those dialogues really kind of start to address that, but they don't go full-fledged. And then he just first the mother takes control and lets Martin go after they tie him up. I don't know what that signifies yet, but then when Steven just takes control and ties them all up, it's like, I didn't expect that, and I don't know if it was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. That I did enjoy those parts, those subtle like jabs that they took at each other. That to me was like, it was great actually. It was thrilling for me. That's like this sort of amp up. And I understand that the very ending, at the point which the Colin Farrell character essentially just does a Russian roulette, but with like his bag over his head, or with a beanie over his head and just turning circles. And I get that that's very much in character, right? Because this guy is just a doof. Like he's just, all throughout the movie, he's indecisive and he is incapable of expressing himself. And he has a very hard decision to make that he can't make. And so he still doesn't necessarily make it at the end. I get that it's in character. I didn't like it though. It's just not something I enjoy.
But that's really what it comes down to. It's like, yeah, I guess I get what they're doing, but I don't enjoy it. So when you try and like make it seem like there's a lot going on, like there's this weird, you know, something to drag you in, it's like, that's great. That's the only thing keeping me interested. And at the end of it, it's just like, who gives a fuck? Yeah.
But there's one interesting thing that happened when Martin calls the daughter when she's in the hospital. He says, I'm at the hospital. She goes, where are you? He's like, in the parking lot, come take a look. And she has the ability to get out of bed to look, and then he's not there. What does that mean?
He's able to control
Yeah.
the curse.
When he's not there, does that mean he walked away? He was invisible?
Well, he was in a parking lot. It's easy for him just to duck away.
Sure.
Because he was there. You did see him.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But then when the daughter went to look, he was nowhere to be found. And she also seems to know, going back to that, like their connection, she seems to know that what is about to happen before anyone else does. She comes home and asks how her brother's doing, and asks how her mom's doing. And the mom's like, yeah, we're fine.
You think it's because she's in good with Martin, basically.
Yeah, Martin explains to her what is going to happen, and she thinks that she has favor, and so it's not really going to affect her. That's why she's so cocky and talking about her brother dying, and actually tries to go down there, tell him to, okay, now get rid of it, do this, make it go away, and he doesn't do it. And so then she flips and tries to run away, scratching up her knees. And then she just starts basically begging her dad to save her.
Okay, so let's talk about the Alicia Silverstone character. What is it like, right? To just like have her pop up on screen. It's this super like really sad character. And really the saddest part is that she just lives with Martin, because Martin just does not seem like a cool dude to live with. And she has to make him spaghetti.
Was that what happened?
What do you mean?
Weren't there leftovers?
Were they, like, she has to make spaghetti? Doesn't
like she's his slave?
Doesn't the mother have to feed? What kind of...
Well, that's just motherhood, sure, but like... I imagine Martin as a supernatural being.
What a martyr, having to serve up spaghetti to a god creature.
She is.
So, if I may, I viewed it as a way to humanize Martin, you know? He's not a standalone character. He lives in a house with a mom, and her husband happened to be the victim of a surgery mishap or anesthesiology mishap.
Alcoholism.
So what?
One of the three.
What happens before the movie? It's that, okay, his father's killed, and then is he just given all this information in a dream? Does like some supernatural entity come into play and it's just like, listen, this is how you kill this whole family?
I think there are a few inferences in the movie that imply Martin could be some sort of god character. You know, if I had to say one of the more beautiful scenes or my favorite scene, when Martin and the daughter go walking, right? They end up at a tree, and he says something like, oh, sing a song for me, and she sings some pop song, and the camera just slowly pans out, and you have this beautiful idyllic scene of them like in the suburban, pasture, whatever it is. That was so out of line with the rest of the movie to me.
It was built for the trailer. That's like a scene that they
Was it even in the trailer, though?
It was, yeah. It was like, it was the trailer, almost.
It's one of those scenes where you're just like, great.
The scene was beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, the way that it was done and pulled off, but again, it's just a rabbit hole that leads to nowhere.
I think that says it all.
All right, well, that's as good a place as any to wrap it up. Any final thoughts?
I think it was gorgeous.
It was a beautiful movie.
Visually gorgeous.
Yeah, it looked great.
Here we go. Beef or bust, Andy?
I think I'm going to go with the beef on this one.
You're going with the beef? I'm
Mainly
going to
because of the
go...
visual.
I'm going to go, and I understand why you're beefing it, but I'm going to bust it.
I'm gonna say it's beef cooked a little too long, and someone dropped it and then tried to give it to me anyway.
And you ate it.
So it's bust for
And
you.
I took a bite, and someone saw me do it. So, in the end, a bust. Write us in. Like, do you agree or do you disagree? And maybe we'll put your questions and strife on the air. We'd like this to be an interactive experience.
Don't email us. That's weird, because we don't have an email yet.
Send us snail mail, address pending.
Comment on that.
Go ahead and give me a self-addressed stamp as well.